Alright, so I feel like this video is going to be a special video because this is the video where I'll finally have my forever lights. The lighting setup on the Jeep is basically gonna stay this way. It's pretty much done. We never use the word done because nothing is ever really done, but after a few years, I feel like I finally know how to fine-tune where I want lights and how I want them to function. And we are gonna be accomplishing that with these. These are Lightforce's 20-inch dual LED light bars. I have said in the past that I am not a fan of light bars, but to clarify, I've never been a fan of like the single row long LED light bars that you see on many vehicles today. And a lot of you like that style, totally fine. They look great. It's just not my cup of tea. However, what I will rock are two 20-inch light bars that are dual row, kind of side by side next to each other on the roof rack. I think that, along with my HTX2s, those humongous off-road lights on my bumper, is just gonna look really, really good. Now, I will say this because I know a lot of you will bring it up. When it comes to installing light bars above your windshield, a lot of people, that's where we put them. But just know that if you're driving through something like fog or hard rain or dust even, sometimes that light will reflect off that stuff and come bouncing back to you, or it'll make a glare on your hood. And a lot of people don't turn on their light bars above their windshield for that specific reason, because after a while it does get a little bit annoying that this light's coming back to you. It makes it even harder for you to see sometimes. So these are not really the lights that I'm going to be turning on when we're going off-roading. These are not my main driving lights. That's what I have the humongous HTX2s on the bumper for. This is more for if I just need that extra light and conditions are clear, it's not foggy, it's not raining, I can shine these and get even more light out of these two. So let's take a deeper look at these light bars and the specs. These light bars are part of a series that Lightforce likes to call the Nightfall series. It's the most current light bars that are available here in the United States. In Australia, they have a brand new series, an upgrade to their light bars called Vipers, but those are currently not available here in the United States yet. When it's gonna be, I don't know, a date hasn't been set yet, but either way, these are still highly capable. Again, these are not going to be my main driving lights anyway. They're just going to be some extra lights when I need it, so I think this will just fit the bill. In the box, you get your instructions, mounting brackets, wiring harness, and then the actual light itself. Now don't worry, it's not blue, that's just the film they put to cover the glass. We get to have fun and peel that later. But first looks, I really love the look of this. It's like this dual light bar, very compact. Two of these next to each other is gonna look really awesome. Here at the top, you have the Lightforce logo, and then right over here, you have the Lightforce logo on the glass as well. You get 40 LEDs in here, and each of those LEDs are 5 watts each. This whole thing weighs about 7 pounds or 3.18 kilograms. Input voltage range 10 to 36 volt DC. LED lifespan gives you up to 50,000 hours. The input cable length, which is this right here, is 450 millimeters or 17.72 inches. Waterproof rating IP69K. And the operating temperature for this is negative 40 degrees Celsius to 63 degrees Celsius, or negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 145.4 degrees Fahrenheit. So as long as you're not somewhere that's negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter than 145.4 degrees Fahrenheit, this should work just fine for you. Overall length of this is 21.89 inches or 556 millimeters, and the height is 84 millimeters or 3.31 inches. The brackets themselves, because I know you're going to be mounting it and you want to know, the brackets themselves are 4.61 inches high, so just a little bit above 4.5 inches high or 117 millimeters, and then the width of them is 90 millimeters or 3.54 inches. All right, so here's the plan. These Amber Rock 40s right here, they're coming out. Kind of sad to see them go. I have loved them. It's just that I don't use my ditch lights as much as I thought I would. So the power going to these are going to be the same power. Just gonna go to the LED light bars. I'm gonna use the same slot in our switch pod for the light bars instead of these. The light bar is gonna go right there underneath the roof rack. I wanted it to be on the lip because we do have this this channel here. The only problem with that though is that these brackets, it's gonna stick out too much like this, especially with the wind fairing in the way. The wind fairing in the middle goes up to the front and that's just not gonna fit these. So the plan is to remove just the front section of this roof rack, get it down. I'll install the LED light bars onto them first, get it all situated, and then mount them back up. But first, gotta get rid of those. I removed the existing ditch lights along with the brackets, only to find that the rubber behind the bracket left a residue that I couldn't just clean off. So I ended up putting the brackets back on. If any of you know of cover plates I can put in this spot without a bracket, let me know in the comments. Before I mount the lights, I decided to plug them into the existing ditch light harness to make sure the lights are functioning properly. Now that I know they are, it's time to remove the front part of the roof rack. I won't bore you with the details of that as your process will vary. Once down, I removed the wind fairing to make room for the lights. One thing I did have to do was drill the holes on the brackets slightly bigger. The hole accepts M6 bolts, but the roof rack T-channel accepts M8. As far as the brackets, you can orient them according to your application. The instructions have it going the other way, but since the two holes on the bracket line up to the two holes on the light bar, it doesn't really matter which way you orient them. After measuring where the middle of the rack will be, I started mounting the lights without tightening the bolts yet so I can make adjustments. I'm glad I decided to remove this part of the rack because mounting the lights became so much easier off the vehicle. With the lights positioned permanently, it was time to mount the whole piece back on the vehicle. The piece is heavier now and very difficult to position with one person, so I used a ratchet strap to prop one side up. From there, I was able to hoist the whole thing back on the roof rack and secure it in place. I used the existing harness for the ditch lights but found I had way too much slack at the top, so I decided to modify it by cutting it to size and then soldering it back together. Soldering is just the best way to ensure strong connections. You can skip the step and just use the provided harnesses that came with the lights if you're not comfortable with electrical work. To hide the wires, I used KC Highlight's wire holder. It hides the wires nicely on the outside of the vehicle and gives it a cleaner look. From there, I just had to route the wires to the engine bay and plug it back to my switch pod. Alright, so lights have been installed, mounted underneath the roof rack. I went and made a harness, or actually customized the existing wiring harness, so that I don't have a bunch of wires that are just kind of bunched up down there. So if you see, the wires are cut to the appropriate length now, comes through here, goes down and is hidden through this KC Highlights wire holder right there, which is a really nice touch so you don't have wires being exposed everywhere. Goes through my old brackets right there and into the engine bay, goes underneath here, perfect length all the way to the Apollo Intech switch pod, which is awesome. If you have a bunch of lights, all you got to do is put the positive and negative. You don't need to worry about relays or switches. Now I did replace the fuse. There used to be a 20 amp fuse in there and I put in a 30 because each of those draws about 12.7 amps each, which comes out to about 25.4 amps. I do have a 25 amp fuse, but that would still be too much for it. So I went and put a 30 amp in there just to keep things safe. And that's pretty much it. Everything's tidied up. Now, all we got to do is see if these are working. We just have to turn on the ignition. And then now, click the lights. And that, to me, is just the perfect combination of amber and white lights. White lights for going straight forward, I can see everything, and then amber for all my scene lighting needs and for my rock lights. I like this combination the best. Now, do I regret removing the Rock 40 amber ditch lights? No, I'm sad to see them go because I've always had ditch lights on the Jeep since I've had the Jeep. I used to run Bajas on them, and then I switched it out to the Lightforce Rock 40s. But I found that I've never used my ditch lights. It was one of those things that everybody talked about when I first got into overlanding. I'm like, oh, that looks really cool. And people still run it. If you use yours, by all means, keep them. I just found that I never used the ditch lights, and I could keep them on and just have it if I needed it. But I just didn't want my vehicle to look like there's all these lights all over the place. I wanted to minimize my lighting setup to the lights that I really need. Plus, my switch pod only has 6 ports on it, and I think that's enough. I think having 6 switches for 6 different auxiliary lights, I think that's all I really need. Last week, I released a video where I converted all my auxiliary lighting to amber lights. I wanted to see how it looked like. A lot of you really liked it, and I liked it too. It looked cool, but to me, it was just too much amber, and I feel like this is just a better balance of both white and amber lights. Speaking of white lights, I don't know if you can tell from the video, but Lightforce never goes ultra white with their lights. They keep everything at about 5,000 kelvins, which is actually what the color temp of these light bars are, because 5,000 to 5,500 kelvins basically mimic daylight. And in Australia, you could be driving for hours on end with no street lights, and if you had ultra white bright lights, after a while it'll start to fatigue your eyes because your eyes are just not used to that kind of temperature. So they like to try to keep things looking as close to daylight as possible, which is basically the most natural way our eyes see things. But really, and I've said it before, that's why I roll with Lightforce. They just have their color science down. They want to make sure that the lights that you put on your vehicle is not just for show, or you have the brightest light out of your entire crew and it's just spilling light everywhere. They want to make sure that you have lights that you will actually use, that's pleasing to your eye, and when you're driving around, it's going to be nice and comfortable, but will still give you a ton of visibility. It's hard for me to try to convince you by video, but if you buy into the Lightforce system, I think you'll be very surprised highly impressed, and you might not want to turn back. Now, there is a downside to running this kind of setup, and that is the wind noise. I had to remove the wind fairing from the front of the roof rack, and I replaced it with these lights. Was riding around town and there was whistling. So I came back home and I put the wind fairing back on about 2 slats behind the lights, and it cut it down dramatically. Like, it pretty much went away, but it's still there. It's not so bothersome, but you can still hear it. Now, this is a noise that I didn't have prior to these lights. I know a lot of people have had complaints that their front runner roof rack had made noises. Mine never did. I never had that issue, but once I put these lights on, the whistling started. Now, front runner does sell brackets that will allow you to relocate your LED light bars to the front of the rack versus underneath it. If this noise becomes too unbearable for me, then I might go that route where I can just get the LED light bars, put them in front of the rack, and then take the wind fairing that I have 3 slats behind and bring them back to the first slat and get back what I had before. But let's be honest, it's a Jeep, and all of us who drive Jeeps have already come to terms with the fact that our vehicles are just loud. But that's it. That pretty much wraps up the Lightforce setup on the Jeep. I feel like it's done, and I love how it's looking. There are some more Lightforce videos that are coming out, one with the crew, because Lightforce decided to outfit them with some lights. We're going to do a whole comparison video on all the different lights that Lightforce offers. Also, I have this extra Rock 40. It came as a pair. One of them I used as the backup light on the Jeep, and I've been saving this one to use as a backup light on the 4Runner. And now that the 4Runner has a ladder from front runner, I think I'm going to install and mount this on that ladder. I think it'll look really cool, so stick around for that. But next week's video, I'm going to go back to the video that I was struggling with when I did my Amber video, which is the TJM air compressor installs on the Jeep and the 4Runner. That's coming out next week. I was rushing the install because I had to go out of town, but now that I'm back, I can actually sit down and make sure that these air compressors are installed correctly. So stick around for that video, but if you liked this video, please make sure you smash, actually don't smash, finally commit and propose to that like button. Subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell so we can let you be aware of videos that are coming out. And if it moves you, support us on Patreon. It allows you access to all of our videos before everyone else. And it also gives you access to the live streams that we sometimes do. And as always, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Baptism Overland. My name is Asia Sampson, and I will see you next time. So I watch these like home renovation reality shows, and I always wondered, like, how do these hosts look so pristine, like while renovating a house, right? Like you see them painting or doing carpentry, and yet their t-shirt or flannel or their pants don't have a single speck of paint or sawdust on them. Like, how are they doing it? And then I learned that they're not really doing the work. A lot of times there's another company that comes and does the work, but when they need to be on camera, then they get all dressed up and then they look like they're painting, and they weren't really doing that the whole time. And I feel like that's what I did this whole video, but me doing the work myself, because in the video, like, I'm wearing my hat and shirt, but when I'm not on camera and I'm doing some of the installs off camera, the shirt and the hat are coming off because it is hot outside. Doing installs in Florida during a heat advisory, yeah, not fun.